You know that pretty famous theme that is common across a ton of fiction, exploring the concept of villainy, where we are forced to come to terms with the fact that villains aren't necessarily born, they are made. A concept famously explored by Mary Shelley in her fantastic Gothic novel, Frankenstein, which saw its most recent adaptation done by Guillermo del Toro. Well, what if I were to tweak that a bit into becoming sex pests aren't necessarily born, they are made, usually by the families who tie their worth to sex and the friends that enable them. Because after finishing How I Met Your Mother season 3 episode 10 titled The Yips, I figured it's a good time for us to address the Barney shaped elephant in the room. God's help us all. But before I dive into talking about Barney and my thoughts on him so far, I will like to put out the disclaimer that this video isn't about making excuses for the behavior of Barney Stinson. Whilst Neil Patrick Harris does bring his charm to the character, we are meant to read a ton of his actions as being very off-putting and outright disgusting in some cases. Barney is a sex pest. The show doesn't attempt to hide it or pretend otherwise, and instead plays it off as him just being, well, Barney. So I just want to state it outright before anyone thinks that this video is meant to justify his actions or behavior within the show. That isn't what this is about. Instead, it is more about unraveling what makes him tick and why he's become the way he is, especially with what I've seen of him so far within the show. Now, if this is your first time finding my channel or watching any of my content, hello, I'm Noria, and welcome to a video series where I am currently documenting my first ever watch of How I Met Your Mother. Full disclosure, this is my first time ever watching the show, and I've quite managed to stay away from spoilers on it as well, so please keep that in mind in your discussion about it in the comments. If you would like to explore something I've said that would venture into spoiler territory, just put the spoiler warning and put a bunch of asterisks, so I will have to click more to read said spoilers, which I won't. But others who are watching this video series and have seen the show can read, and you all can have all that discussion and engagement in the comments. For those who are keeping track, like I mentioned earlier, I've watched up to the end of season 3 episode 10. And if you're one of those wondering why on earth I'm making a video series chronicling my watch through of the series, think of it as a study where you get to take in the show through the eyes of a first-time viewer with observations about the characters, who likes to talk about them and make predictions that it would be fun to see if I'm vindicated about, or if I fall flat on my face with how wrong I am. As is my usual practice, I will start by giving a synopsis of the episode before I dive into fully fleshing out my thoughts. There are, of course, timestamps imputed into the video so you can navigate it as you so choose. But before I get into that, a quick thank you to my lovely patrons and YouTube members whose support have been instrumental in helping me continue to make content, especially since I started doing this full time at the start of the year, which was the last time I was in paid employment. And a special shout out to Lina and Holly for their extra support. You get all the hearts and kisses too. Mwah. If you too would like to support me on Patreon or become a YouTube member to enjoy certain perks, even get a shout out, the link to do so is in the description bar. And with that said, The Yips opens with Ted in a moment that for the first time in my entirety of watching this show so far, I relate to completely. In the process of receiving his pizza delivery, he realizes that he's completely out of shape and so consoles himself by eating the entire box. And let me tell you, when I say I've never related more to a character, damn it. If cannot stop face with pizza, why pizza so cheesy and gooey and yummy? Anyway, Ted decides to do the logical thing, which is sign up for the gym, specifically Barney's gym, where Barney doesn't actually work out, but instead spends his time being supportive of plus-sized women who are seeking to lose weight. Not for any altruistic reason, of course. It is Barney after all. No, he's doing this so that when they are at a size that he deems worthy of a fuck, they can remember him fondly as the guy who was supportive of them whilst they were trying to lose weight, i.e., he will be able to fuck them. Yes, Barney is a sleaze. Back to Ted. Ted, like I said, decides to sign up for the gym, but he, of course, refuses to go alone and so convinces the rest of their friends to also sign up for gym memberships. Everyone is pretty excited to start, particularly Marshall, but then he gets stuck with a trainer from hell who believes that riding Marshall's ass hard would be motivating to him. As someone who hates being yelled at and would not pay you a dime to humiliate me, let's just say I felt sorry for Marshall throughout this entire episode. Especially because whilst he was going through hell in that regard, Lily's trainer, on the other hand, was much gentler with her and instead helps properly stretch her out, since what she wants to work on is her flexibility and mobility, until it is discovered that her trainer isn't actually someone who works at the gym and is instead a creep who lies that he is a trainer in order to get handsy with women, which, ew. Barney might be a sex pest, but at least he hasn't done that to any woman so far. That is some vile ass shit. Now, whilst Marshall and Lily are doing that whole bit of the couple that works out together, stays together, Ted is losing interest in Robin because of how unattractive she looks whilst working out. Of course, I call bullshit on this because even sweaty and grunting, especially sweating and grunting, Kobe Smulders, who plays Robin, is hot as fuck. This show needs to work harder at trying to make me think unattractive and Robin in the same sentence. And if you're wondering where Ted is in all of this, well, he's sneaky ass after getting his friends to sign up with him at the gym. Whilst everybody is pushing their body to its limits, Ted keeps finding reasons to leave the gym without working out. And when his friends figure it out, they sick Marshall's trainer on him and she rides his ass into Pain Town, which made me cackle. Not going to lie. Now, whilst all of this is happening, the main plot of the Yips follows Barney, because this is one of those Barney-centric episodes. You see, whilst at the gym's smoothie bar, Barney runs into Rhonda, his mother's friend that he had told the gang he lost his virginity to. Apparently, after his breakup with his ex, the girl he loved, Shannon, Barney had come crying to his brother James, who, unknown to him at the time, had set him up with Rhonda to lose his virginity to her. It's been years since, and Barney is somewhat thrilled to meet her, since Rhonda is the one who basically made him a man and boosted his confidence. What with her declaration after they'd had sex, his first time, mind you, that he rocked her world. The problem, however, is that Rhonda doesn't remember shit. She doesn't even remember Barney, and in fact keeps calling him Barry. As if that isn't ego crushing enough, Rhonda also admits the truth to him, that it was James who had come to her earlier to ask her to agree to Barney's proposal that they have sex. And even though she hadn't wanted to have sex with Barney, she reconsidered after looking carefully at James and informing him that if he has sex with her, she will fuck his brother. James, who at the time was still pretending to be straight, takes one for the team and has sex with Rhonda so she can disvirgin his baby brother. But the hits keep coming, because then Rhonda admits that her claim to Barney that he had rocked her world was all a lie, because like most virgins on their first try, Barney hadn't been very impressive. And then we do a flashback scene to see that whilst in Barney's memory, she was very enthusiastic about him having rocked her world, the truth is she was practically bored out of her mind when she tells him that. This causes Barney to start spiraling as he loses his ability to be smooth and suave in picking up women. Yep, Barney Stinson has the yips. Desperate to recover his mojo, he heads to the Victoria's Secret fashion show after party with Ted and Marshall, where he then proceeds to have a severe case of foot-in-mouth syndrome, or the yips, fumbling body upon body. Even Alessandra Ambrosio, who, by the way, I am pretty sure I was in love with in the early 2000s. What a babe. When he finally stumbles on Heidi Klum, and yes, when she showed up, my brain did the thing where it started asking random questions. Firstly, was this back when she was still married to Seal? And also, how on earth were they able to afford Heidi Klum in this episode as a guest? Damn, the networks must have dropped some good cheddar for this. How I Met Your Mother was making bank. Yes, people. That was my brain whilst I was cheesing and grinning hard at Heidi in the scene. She's so cute. Luckily for Barney, she's the one who ends up giving him a solution to his problem, which is that the best way for him to get over the yips is to go back to Rhonda and try again with her, since she was the one who gave him his mojo the first time, and it is her unraveling of the mask of competence that had sent him spiraling. The problem though is that Rhonda turns him down, telling him that she's giving up trying to chase that high via meaningless sex with young men and has instead turned to gambling. But things escalate and Barney and Rhonda have sex, and this time around, Rhonda is very enthusiastic about Barney having rocked her world, whilst Barney is now the one with more experience who is unimpressed and leaves her room with an extra pep in his step, indicating that Barney Stinson has regained his mojo and his temporary days of having the yips are now behind him. The end. The yips, like the other Barney-centric episodes that we occasionally get in the show, fascinate me because of how we gain further insight into exactly how Barney as a character is made. The sequence of events that have turned him into the suit-wearing, high-five-giving legend, wait for it, dairy creep that he's been for significant portions of the show. Season 1, episode 15, titled Game Night, is when we are introduced to the character of Shannon, Barney's first girlfriend, who he was with back when he was in his laid-back, save-the-world hippie state, saving his virginity for the girl he loves, until he discovers that said girl has been cheating on him with another man, a wealthier, suave, suit-wearing man, which ends up being the turning point that birthed the Barney as we now know him. Now, I had always thought that that was where the story with Shannon wrapped up. After all, the episode ends with Barney reuniting with his ex, tricking her into thinking he wants more with her, and instead, after they have sex, he bails like he's always done with the hookups he has had with the various women that have traipsed in and out of his life. However, the yips pulls the curtain back further to show that that wasn't everything, and instead that sequence of events is what brought Rhonda into Barney's orbit. Rhonda, as we remember, is Barney's mother's friend that he tells us about in First Time in New York, that is season 2, episode 12, when Robin's baby sister desires to lose her virginity to her boyfriend, which in turn has the entire crew remembering their various first times. And whilst Barney initially tries to avoid sharing his by narrating various movie scenes, he eventually caves and admits that he had lost his virginity at 23 to his mother's 40-something old friend, Rhonda, who hadn't even bothered to remember his name. Now, having the yips connect these two events together, where Rhonda is who Barney turned to immediately after Shannon broke his heart, was brilliant in the little setups that the show had given up so far, and I really enjoyed it when it all connected for me. I was like, of course that makes sense. And of course, the person who stands in the middle of it, that is the connecting thread of how Barney's heartbreak was transformed into a rebirth of his sex pest self, is his brother James. Like I stated at the start of the video, this is not an attempt to try and justify Barney's behavior or rid him of the role he plays in how he treats the women he's hooked up with so in the show so far. Instead, what I would like to highlight, like I stated in my introduction, is how the people in his life have also had a role to play in the type of person he now is, starting with James. I mean, the yips gives us the revelation that everything that happened with Rhonda, from her acquiescence to having sex with Barney and her praising him as being the best she's ever had, which was what gave him that ego boost that turned him into the man whore we know, and some would say love and others would say absolutely come to loathe, can all be traced back to James. James, who as at when his baby brother came crying to him of a broken heart, was knee-deep in pretending to be straight and overcompensating as a result of it by performing this satirical facade of the beer-chugging, sports-watching, woman-loving heterosexual male that is nothing like who he actually is, meant that when it came down to it for him to offer Barney comfort or advice, he isn't quite able to do so because, to be fair, James was hiding a very big part of his identity from the world, and especially from Barney at that point in time. And every time I think of that scene, I consider the fact that that was an opportunity, a teaching moment for Barney from his big brother, where James could have helped his baby brother see that his worth is not tied to his relations with women, that he is more than Shannon breaking his heart, and that the heartbreak is not worth Barney changing who he is at his core as a result of that. It would have been an amazing chance for James to help Barney realize that, is better than that, is beyond that, that there is nothing wrong with his inherent kindness and vulnerability and the love that he gave so willingly, even when it was thrown in his face and spat on, that says more about who Shannon is as a person than it does about his brother, that Barney has no reason to be ashamed of his soft heart. But that would have required a moment of vulnerability, of speaking the truth and not just letting Barney bulldoze his way through, convinced that what he needs is to get laid and become this Lothario in order to spite the woman who broke his heart. It would have been great for James to have him see that that still gave Shannon power over him and his actions, because Barney was letting her actions change him from the person he used to be. Of course, that vulnerability is a two-way street and would have required James to be just as self-aware and honest to Barney about how he too has been pretending. Unfortunately, he was buried in a life where he was pretending to be somebody he wasn't, unable to live his own truth and believe that he would be accepted for himself, instead choosing to lean into the play acting forced on him by a society that would rather see him act straight than be gay. And what we are left with is a recipe for disaster and two brothers who end up going off of the deep end because of their desperation to not be who they think they're allowed to be. James can't be gay and Barney can't be a bleeding heart sap, and thus in comes Rhonda, the man maker, with a reputation for seducing young virgin boys and men, giving them their first sexual experience. And even though she doesn't initially want to have sex with Barney, she turns her sights to proposition James instead. I know it is meant to be a somewhat oddly sweet moment that in order to help his brother lose his V card and gain the confidence to go out into the world and bed as many women as he can, James, who very much is not attracted to women, has sex with Rhonda to help his brother. And yet, all I kept thinking was, it would have been better served talking to Barney consistently, not letting Barney brush off the initial advice, because what instead happened was the paving of the road to the road was the paving of the way to the road that is the sex pest called Barney Stinson. And whilst his brother had the role he played initially, I do not consider his friends any less guilty either. Now, I did mention back in the episode Mary the Paralegal that Barney's friends never quite call him to order with the way in which he treats the women he brings around them. Matter of fact, Lily and Robin were quite judgmental of Mary when they thought she was a sex worker, and sure, they are appalled when Barney reveals that it was all a big prank he was playing on Ted, since Mary is actually a paralegal like she had kept introducing herself as. But like a lot of other bits of Barney's idiosyncrasies, it's played off for laughs and the occasional bit of disgust within the show. Ted, Lily, Robin, and even Marshall, as much as I love him, are all guilty of this. It is said that where people keep quiet, the wicked are allowed to thrive, and that proverb exists for a reason, because you need that silence to create a space where wickedness is allowed to go on without being challenged. And I've always wondered who is worse in that regard, the wicked person who is doing the shittiest of deeds, or the good person who sees them and says nothing because they don't want to bring any attention to themselves, because they don't want to risk losing that friendship or relationship, because they do not want to make things awkward. Matter of fact, I thought that was all that was with the gang's dynamic. But something Ted says in the slaps giving episode, which is the one before this, where he and Robin are arguing about Ted's jealousy of Robin's new boyfriend, struck me the wrong way. Now, when Robin calls out Ted for his behavior, he tells her that he's just joking around and that is what the friends do. How come they, and by they is referring to the rest of the McLaren 5, sans Barney by the way, are allowed to bust on Barney when he dates some skanktron. But when Robin sleeps with the crypt keeper's dad, he's not allowed to say a word. And I don't know, that entire line struck me because you see, prior to that, I was working off of the assumption that these friends are aware of Barney being a scumbag to these women, and Ted's words confirmed that. However, why the women are the ones being called skank is something that irritates me. In the show, we established that a lot of these girls are just being by themselves when Barney hits on them. He's the one that is down for the hookup, bangs them and leaves. So why on earth is Ted slut shaming them in that scene? It's because he doesn't see them as people who are deserving of respect, which is why he and the rest of the crew are able to maintain their friendship with Barney. And rather than call him out on his behavior, they just needle him instead. Because I don't know who needs to hear this, but teasing your friend and needling them on the ever-revolving door that is their bedroom or whichever space they're having sex in is not the same as calling them out for the frankly sometimes predatory behavior that they see them engage in. And of course, That cannot happen when you believe in your mind. You call these women scanctrons, because then it subtly justifies Barney's behavior towards them. That the reason why it is not such a big deal is because the women he keeps tricking into having sex with him are by themselves skanks. Which then has me wondering, what happens when he has sex with somebody that they do not think of as a skank? Or is it that by virtue of the fact that if your vagina comes in any contact with Barney's penis, you're a skank by default? Is that it? And it also really put things into perspective for me with regards Mary the paralegal, because now when I think of that episode, I can see why the focus wasn't on Mary and how hurt and humiliated she might feel at the quite frankly not funny prank, but instead all they thought about was Ted and his feelings, because that is what mattered more to them, or at least that's what I had thought before. But with the slaps giving episode, it had me thinking that, you know what, maybe it is because they all are as dismissive of these women as Ted was in that scene as well. Ted was their mouthpiece. I mean, Robin doesn't challenge him on those words. Her focus is instead on rightfully calling out Ted's hypocritical ass. And in so doing, we are able to see the way in which Barney's friends silently view these women and why they are never going to challenge his behavior, and why, in a way, they are pretty okay with it. And in letting it go, they continue to enable the person he is. Now, I am going to repeat it yet again. This is not me saying that I believe that Barney has no responsibility in how he acts and the choices he makes. I hold him responsible for them as well. What I just want to point out is the fact that between his brother basically letting him double down on his belief that his identity and worth is tied to the women he has sex with, and how he's able to walk away from the experience with his ego unchecked, and his friends silently believing that all these women are merely skanks, and so they brush off his antics as being just that, antics, Barney being Barney. I think between these two, there's really no reason for Barney at this point to be better. Once again, not saying that he's not a piece of shit as he is. I'm just saying that his family and friends didn't help either. But of course, these are just my thoughts. I would, as always, love to hear yours. Whether or not you agree with me, please share them in the comments. Like this video, however, if you've watched this far and haven't done so yet, but enjoy anything of what I had to say, share it so others can find my channel as well. Or you can check out my gaming or ASMR channels if they sound like something you might be interested in. I have both of them linked in the description bar. I will see you tomorrow with a new video. Until then, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.